Welcome to Mapping Success. I'm Dr. Marie Morse, and we're turning dreams into destinations. I'm so glad that you're back to continue on your journey to the commitment of the best version of you. We are now part of a community, and we are all working towards that same goal. Although our destinations may be different, we are definitely cheerleading each other to get there. We started digging into our family relationships on our last episode, where we talked about how did our childhood or adolescence, or even maybe it was only 5 years ago, maybe 5 months ago, of what our family interactions do and how they really influence who we are and how we respond in a variety of different ways. You've probably heard me say, if not once, a million times, that I really function on 5 principles of trust, respect, communication. At work, it's best in class care, but you can replace best in class with whatever it is that you really prioritize in teamwork. After laying the foundation of how family influences us, because that really is the earliest relationships that we all engage in, it now is time to unpack how friendships and romantic relationships play into this. When I look at friendships and romantic partners, one of the things I would say is what we learned about family influence on relationships really echoes true in what I'm about to say. Growing up, my parents were always worried that I was too kind, that I would always put others before me, that I always looked for the good in someone, even when they didn't have it to offer. And so I frequently remember hearing my parents say to me, Marie, people will mistake kindness for weakness. I had a choice to make. I could either stop leading with kindness or potentially utilize my emotional intelligence to recognize when what my parents were saying perhaps might be true. So one of the things I first want to point out is that from a very early age, we hear things like, be nice, share your toys, be nice, share your toys, be nice. Don't say those mean things, be nice. One of the things that is really important is to recognize that words have meanings. Although that seems obvious, we frequently are using words incorrectly. Nice and kind are not necessarily the same thing that you actually want your children to be. Nice is, I can hate your guts, and I will smile and offer you something to eat. That is not kind. Kind is leading with sympathy, leading with empathy, truly being your genuine form of who you are. So I would say that I disagree with the idea that kindness can be mistaken for weakness. I think it is a weakness to misguide when you should be kind. And so kindness, I think, is something that I will never let go of. And I think it's always been a part of who I am. It's an innate fiber of who it is that I want to be. I don't want to be nice. Nice is the actor. Kind is the muse. So I hope that the muse that I'm able to provide for others is a role model of, even if you hurt me, even if you did break my trust, I can still be kind because of the fact that that is a part of who I am. And it is also a part of how I determine who I'm going to keep in my life. It's important when you are falling prey for individuals who are taking advantage of you, whether it's those one-way streets or your fair weather friends, that you lean into your emotional intelligence. This is where that skill set becomes important. Your own self-awareness is not just how you feel in the moment. It is also your appreciation for when you feel like something is off, when you are leaning into that quote unquote spidey sense, that sixth sense. It's intimately related with that social awareness. The social awareness is not just recognizing how the other may be feeling, but also how you may be feeling in response to them. The management is where you need to be able to determine, is this something I continue to double down and invest in, or where we cut ties right now? So I was recently at a TED conference, and it was an amazing opportunity. You had to apply and be accepted to be able to attend. And so you can imagine there was about 1,000 people who were at this event who all had absolutely incredible stories and what they brought to the table intellectually, emotionally, from experiences, what they've accomplished, what they plan to accomplish, what their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations. There were so many destinations on the table at this conference. It was inspiring to be there. So there was not one person who I met who I didn't feel a connection to or a value proposition by establishing a relationship. But there was one very, very particular individual who I think clearly impacted me. This individual, he was a brilliant, very thoughtful professor. He asked me, "Do you have many friends?" I said, as an adult, I don't think I actually have that many friends. I think as adults, we tend to have more acquaintances, and life competes with friendships. And even our friends have life that compete with our friendship. And so it's not that I am upset or angry or resent anyone because friendships fall apart. I think that we all just have to follow our own roads. And he said, "Well, the friendships that you have, what do you value in them?" And I said, "Well, I value that we have shared goals, we have shared interests, we have similar value systems. We can not talk for months and pick up the phone and be able to pick up like we just spoke an hour ago." He goes, "Okay. When you made friends, did you ask people if you want to be their friend?" And I said, "Of course not. Who does that?" He goes, "And when you made friends, did you set expectations or kind of what would be a part of that friendship?" Kind of, no. So friendships evolve. They just kind of happen. Those types of things happen over time. He goes, "Do you think that's why friendships sometimes don't last?" Is because there are no clear expectations or roles or responsibilities. You have to wait and see whether or not someone actually is invested in you. And that took me back because he's right. That makes a difference. If I were to take a job, those would be things I would know. If I was to date someone, these are things I would want to know. Why would friendship be any different? So he said to me, or I guess asked me, "Marie Morse, do you want to be my friend?" I said, "After this conversation, I definitely do." He said, "I'm going to send you a contract for you to review to see if the terms are acceptable to being my friend." Do you want to know what's interesting about this? That conference was end of October, early November. He sent me that contract. I reviewed it. And I wanted to be purposeful in reviewing it and really thoughtful. What happened? Life competed. I never signed it until today. As I was preparing for this episode, I said, "Oh my God, I'm such an ass." I told this person I wanted to be their friend. I diligently reviewed their contract, reviewed their terms, agreed instinctually, emotionally, cognitively with every single point that they made, and failed to respond. I'm a terrible friend. I signed it. I sent it back. And within minutes, this person responded saying that they were grateful that I took the time to read and respond and agree to be his friend. That to me set a new precedent of what friendship could look like. It is a clear outline, and it actually was no different than what I described to him as why I value the friends that exist in my life. Is that it's purposeful, there's shared values, there's shared interests. I can go for months not connecting, and on a spur of a moment, it's as if we had just talked an hour before. That was proof of concept right there. It cut through all the garbage. A friend contract. Who would have known? So I'm not saying that everyone has to go and start having friend contracts, but what I would say to you is what we should be doing is being purposeful in all of our actions. You've heard me say repeatedly how time in life competes. Being purposeful with time and how you utilize it and who you invested in is one of the most important assets that you have. You spend it frivolously, sometimes where we shouldn't. This was a really purposeful reminder. And as you've heard me say many times, it sometimes takes these very, very stark, very poignant experiences for you to really reconcile the fact that you're doing things all wrong. And not saying that with criticism, but saying it with the opportunity that you can be better and live better. So identifying and establishing common ground, things that are going to be similar, being able to say, these are the goals that I want from this relationship. This is how I want to see us be able to have reciprocation in what we bring to the table. Interestingly, another factor that can make or break a relationship, circadian patterns. Yes, you knew it. You knew that the sleep doctor was going to bring something in with sleep and circadian science. But think about it. If I am the morning lark, I love to be up at 4 to 5 o'clock in the morning, get my exercise on, go get my latte, have my perfect bar, start my day just slaying. And the person who is one of the closest people or people who I want to be closest to doesn't wake up until noon and is up until 4 o'clock in the morning, they're going to sleep when I'm waking up. There's no opportunity for interaction, for engagement. We're going to have very different paths that we're moving forward with. So consider that as an attribute that really makes a big difference. You also want to think about your growth mindset, recognizing that if you are someone who sees the sky is where you want to go, but the people you surround yourself with only view that they don't want to go more than 2 stories in a building, you may end up outgrowing one another, or you may limit yourself in your own personal growth. So we've already talked about how friendships are one that we can choose and be purposeful with. It doesn't mean go get rid of any of your friends that you've had from childhood, but I would encourage you to examine, are they bringing what you thought they are? Or are you holding on to people in your life like baggage because they've been there so long? We sometimes keep things around for sentimental value, but not for what the actual value of what is needed in our lives. Friendships are one of those things. So we've talked about friends, but I think another relationship that is really important for us to think through is our romantic relationships. With that stated, I'm going to bring back those key principles: trust, respect, communication. Many times you hear things like opposites attract. And although it might be true for magnets, oil and water, not so much. So therefore, identifying whether or not you do always have similarities, differences, everyone has their differences. It's not a matter of seeking out the person who's the polar opposite of you. And if you are in one of those relationships, if there are the very, very fiber of your existence that are similar, that allow for you to be stitched together and be complementary, then that's something that may be degrees or ingredients rather for success. But it's really important that when we are looking at our romantic relationships, that we're identifying partners that are fulfilling all of the attributes that we need through friendship. Our romantic partners are going to be our best friends. I have to stop because I think I said partners.
I think you did too.
So what we've learned is being purposeful in who it is that we're going to be our friends. And it doesn't mean that you have to go and get rid of people who you've grown up with. But what it may mean is we may need to just reevaluate whether or not those who we've grown up with and have been our friends for so long, do they continue to be in our life because of sentimental value or because they continue to bring value in the journey of where you're going? We sometimes have to be cautious of when we bring too much baggage into our cars, it can slow us down and sometimes even break us down. Having that careful inspection may help you get to that destination that you're seeking to get to a lot sooner. What's amazing is that when we examine the relationships that we have through the first several spheres of life, our family relationships and our friendships greatly influence some of the most important relationships that will be with us lifelong. And those can be our romantic relationships or those who we choose as our life partners. And sometimes we don't realize this until we've gone through a divorce or a breakup of why it wasn't meant to be to begin with. We already learned those lessons with our families and our friends, but yet we choose to learn them again when we're choosing a partner. Well, I would say starting with some of the basic principles of how you're being purposeful in choosing a friend and creating a friendship are the same factors that you need to do when you're choosing a romantic partner or when you're in a romantic relationship. That person is innately going to be your best friend. Why? Because of the fact that you're going to spend the most time with them. And there needs to be the foundational elements of trust, respect, and communication. So all the things that would be the most important to you in your life are going to become the most important thing for them in their lives as well. Sharing in that journey. So many times you may hear things like opposites attract, and that might work for magnets, but oil and water, not so much, kind of separates them. And so it's not to say that opposites can't necessarily form the best dynamic for a relationship, but it is something to make sure that there are signature components of your relationship, if you and your partner are considered opposites, that actually are reinforcing some of those foundational elements that allow for you to be unbreakable, that allow for you to be able to sow the seeds of growth. And if they're not there, you're just waiting for things to collapse. You want to make sure that you're always being honest and transparent. Communication means not intentionally leaving gaps in what is being said or listened to just because of the fact that you want a certain outcome. You also want to make sure that if you're having a relationship that's going to be successful, that you're following through on commitments. Saying you're doing one thing, but doing something else is going to result in a breakdown of your trust, and you're going to feel disrespected. That's going to lead to withdrawal of willful communication. I'll say that is one of my own fatal flaws. If something isn't going right, the response that you'll get is fine. Everything's fine. I'm fine. You're fine. No, nothing. Everything is good. Everything is fine. So that obviously is not leading to anything that is constructive, that is destructive behavior. The one thing that I would say may be unique to a romantic relationship is going to be a focus on intimacy. Now, of course, there's a form of intimacy that can be with friendships and family relationships, but the intimacy in a romantic relationship really is one that requires ongoing attention and nurturing. The simple kiss in the morning before you leave, the holding hands, the touch of endearment, those are all really important. However, one that sometimes gets mistaken as, or almost taken for granted, is making sure you're being purposeful in having time together and time alone. One of the things I've learned as a mom of 2 kids is that it's very hard to create that time. It also is hard to not feel guilty for wanting to have time away from your children. But if you want to nurture and protect the relationship you have with your significant other, you have to do it. It will only serve as a good role model for your children. When looking at intimacy, one of the things that we're seeing as a growing trend and problem is actually sleep divorces. Couples who are purposefully sleeping in different beds or at different times. And although this sometimes can be a solution for helping to get a better night's sleep, and you know that I'm an advocate for that, it very frequently can break down the intimacy and then also leads to reduction in that trust, respect, communication, that teamwork, and that best-in-class relationship. When we start sleeping at different times and in different beds, we lose the physical touch. And although it sounds like a warm and fuzzy, that means we're starting to lose all of the neurohormones that actually promote that connection, promoting the serotonin and the dopamine and all of that leads to the feel good, to the natural response. So making sure that we're being purposeful and exercising our understanding on what we can do to be able to optimize choosing a romantic partner, sustaining a romantic relationship, and then also keeping the intimacy. Very frequently when I talk about sleep, I say I want to make sleep sexy. And part of that is because of the fact that there's two things that can occur in bed, and this is for adult ears only, is sleep and sex. If we're not sleeping in the same bed, you're definitely not having the intimacy and you're not having the ability to have all the components that are meaningful in sustaining that relationship. Today, we've talked about another sphere of relationships. We started with families, we're now with friends and our romantic partners, and we've learned a whole host of skills of how being purposeful in our relationships. How do we learn from successful and non-successful experiences? How does that inform on our emotional intelligence, enhancing our self-awareness and self-management, learning how to hone those skills and be better at accepting that spidey sense when it's telling us that we're in those relationships that are one-way streets or audition behaviors or just not the fulfilling value filled. And we're holding on to them for sentimental reasons or for something that we're mistaking as bringing fulfillment to us. I'm proud of you. I'm proud that we have gotten to this point of self-exploration and social exploration to see what it is that we can do to be empowered, to say, this is what I'm bringing to the world, not what the world is bringing on to me. So we've talked a lot about relationships that do have a significant degree of intimacy and feel really personal. With that, the next step that we're going to take is using all of the skills that we've just learned and understand how they impact another relationship that maybe you're not necessarily considering. Work. You may think to yourself, that seems far-fetched. How is what I do with my friends, family, and loved ones going to reflect on what my work life looks like? It sounds like an HR problem waiting to happen. Well, tune in next time, and I'll fill you in.
As you hold on to that dream, there are moments when you're going to doubt yourself. There are rough times are going to come, but they have not come to stay. They have come to pass.